This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered medical or health advice. This podcast is not intended to replace professional medical advice, nor have the statements been evaluated by the US FDA or similar international bodies. We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of information shared during this podcast. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the host. Greetings, health and human enthusiasts, and welcome to the Regaining Health and Humanity podcast. I'm your trusted guide, Dr. Scott Johnson, and I'm both humbled and thrilled that you've chosen to join me on this fearless pursuit of knowledge and inspiration. My mission is to elevate your well-being naturally, arming you with evidence-based insights, revolutionary breakthroughs, and impactful health tactics. But that's not all. Together, we'll dive deep into the mysterious realms of human existence, unraveling the secrets of what makes us truly thrive. This podcast isn't just about information. It's a catalyst for change. Join me in confidently exploring potent natural solutions, cutting-edge health strategies, and igniting courageous conversations that cultivate meaningful connections and foster empathy for humankind. I'm here to empower you to unleash your extraordinary potential and lead a life jam-packed with boundless health and happiness. So get ready. Your extraordinary journey to boundless health and happiness starts now. Welcome, everyone. I'm excited about tonight's podcast because we have another great guest and another great topic. I feel like I say that every time, but that's the goal, is to get great guests and have great topics so that people are interested and we share information that will be actionable for people and improve their lives. So tonight I have Dr. Philippe Douyon, who is a board-certified neurologist who completed his residency in neurology at New York University and fellowship at New York Presbyterian Cornell in clinical neurophysiology. He spent the last several years caring for people with neurological disorders with a special emphasis on people with a history of epilepsy, seizures, and non-epileptic events. After spending years witnessing the deleterious effects of neurological disorders, Dr. Douyon realized that there were better ways to serve people and prevent the decline of brain health while supporting total body health. He believes that taking charge of your brain is the first step in relief, change, and healing, and that medications do little to modify the underlying disease process. After years of observing the delicate balancing act between side effects and symptom relief, he realized that he could do better for the people he served. He now incorporates a multimodal approach to improve the lives of people with neurological disorders and promote brain health. So welcome, Dr. Douyon, and thank you for agreeing to share with our listeners how they can take better charge of their brain to take charge of their health.
Oh, thank you for having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. So I want to get right into it. How does our understanding of neuroplasticity contribute to the concept of brain resilience? And what are some practical ways individuals can harness neuroplasticity to enhance cognitive function and resilience?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So neuroplasticity is our brain's ability to adapt, learn, and to heal from injury. And when we think about it from a cellular perspective, neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to make new neurons and new connections amongst neurons. And so we used to think that our brains were fairly static, that our brains didn't really change. And when they would change, it would be because we got some kind of degenerative disease like dementia, or we had some kind of traumatic brain injury, things that caused us to lose neurons. But we now know that our brains are constantly changing and they're constantly evolving. We have the ability to make new neurons our entire lives as long as we're giving our brains what it needs in order for that process to take place. And so, what's incredibly powerful about that are two things. One, if our brains are capable of changing in some really positive ways, to me, that means that we're capable of changing as individuals, as communities, as a society, um, just as a species in ways that are really positive. And
Right.
then the other powerful thing about that is that we're in control of our brain's ability to evolve in some really magnificent ways. And so, if we are doing the things that are really healthy for our brains, that sort of allows our brains to become resilient, to adapt to the stresses of our lives. So that way, maybe if we have some kind of brain injury, we're able to potentially improve from that. Or, it allows us to also prevent certain things from happening, such like dementia. Dementia is very much a lifestyle disease.
Right. Yeah, I really agree with that, and I'm glad that you mentioned the concept of we now know the brain can adapt and create new neurons, where before we thought that it just was kind of static and didn't change, which is fascinating that we really know so little about our brains right now. But we're continuing to learn, and the more we learn, the more we can implement these things to reduce these lifestyle diseases of the brain that you're talking about. How does the brain's ability to adapt and reorganize itself throughout life impact brain resilience and recovery from injury?
Yeah. So let's think about a stroke, right? So when somebody has a stroke, there's a clot that goes to a particular blood vessel, blocks the flow of blood to that artery, and as a result, the part of the brain that was being supplied by that artery tends to die, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
why people get the symptoms that they get, like they get the weakness or the difficulty speaking. But our brain has this incredible ability to sort of reorganize itself and to create new neurons and new connections. And one of the things that I often see when people have a stroke, let's say they're weak on their right side, right? They'll start doing some physical therapy. Usually, right when they're in the hospital, they'll do physical therapy, they'll get discharged to a rehab center. Insurance will only pay for it for about 6 to 8 weeks or so. But when somebody has a stroke, your entire brain goes into shock. Even if it's
Mm-hmm.
one part of the brain that essentially stroked out, but your entire brain goes into shock. And that can last for a period of about 6 weeks. So for a lot of people, the real healing starts to take place at that like 6 week mark when therapy sort of gets cut off. Right. And so what do we see? We see people who are weak, they stop using that side that's been affected. If they're weak on the right side, they just stop using that right side. Maybe they'll try to compensate a little bit more with their left side. Some people kind of give up altogether. But our brain has the ability to heal from injury weeks, months, and even years after the injury took place, as long as you are reminding your brain that, look, no, I need to constantly work at this thing. Doesn't mean that it'll get back to 100%, but you can significantly improve as long as you're doing the therapies and the exercises that you need to do in order for your brain to heal.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that gives people a lot of hope, because some people will say, well, I had a TBI years ago, and so I'm lost. I don't have any hope to change. But what you're saying is they do have that ability if they're doing the right things. They may not get back to what they were pre TBI, but they can see improvement.
Absolutely. And they need to change their mindset. Right. So, oftentimes I tell this story of a patient that I had who had epilepsy, was having seizures. We got this person to a place where they were just seizure free. Person was seeing me in the office for follow up, hadn't had a seizure in almost a year. Comes into my office and I'm like, hey, how have you been? Have you had a seizure? He's like, no, I've been good. I'm like, what have you been doing with your life? Have you been working? Have you been volunteering? Are you in school? And he's like, no, I've got epilepsy. And I'm like, okay, but you haven't had a seizure in almost a year. So are you just waiting for the next one to happen? Right. So we've got to change our mindset and our approach to the way that we treat ourselves when we get labeled with one of these diagnoses. We don't always have to live up to the label, right? We're capable of so much more than that.
Yeah, those are great words of wisdom. I totally agree. What are some, you've mentioned lifestyle, so what are some key lifestyle factors that significantly impact brain health, and how can individuals integrate them into their daily routines?
Yeah, so exercise is huge. Exercise is probably the biggest promoter of neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to make those new neurons and new connections. I know plenty of neurologists, neuroscientists, neuropsychologists, when they are dealing with anxiety and depression, they don't treat themselves with pills. They treat themselves by exercising.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I know this neuropsychologist who plays tennis every single day. He lives in New York. And so even if there is snow and ice on the ground, he will go out and hit tennis balls against the wall. That's how he treats his crippling anxiety. Because exercise is the best antidepressant, anti-anxiety treatment that we have. So exercise is key. You know, eating healthy foods is also incredibly important, right? When we're getting bloated, when we're feeling, unwell after we eat a huge meal, that's because we're becoming really inflamed. And that inflammation doesn't just stay in the gut, it travels all over the body, and that includes the brain. Right? And so oftentimes there are neurological symptoms that we can treat just by changing the way somebody eats, especially when it comes to things like migraine headaches, when it comes to things like seizures. Oftentimes, we'll treat seizures that are medically refractory, so they don't respond to
Mm-hmm.
medication by changing somebody's diet, which really should be the first thing that we do is change their diet. But it ends up being, something that we do after we try other options. So exercise, eating healthy, making sure that you're getting enough sleep. You've got to get anywhere from 6 to 9 hours of sleep every single night, because in those deeper stages of sleep is when your brain is actually making new neurons and new connections. In those deeper stages of sleep is when your brain is removing the toxins that have built up throughout the day, um, you know, just from the work that the brain is doing. And in fact, we know that people who are sleep deprived in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s are more likely to develop dementia in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. So sleep is incredibly important. Another thing that people don't often think about, the people that we spend the most time with have an impact on how our brains evolve. We've got these neurons in our brains called mirror neurons that essentially allow us to mimic the actions of the people that we spend time with. And so if I scratch my nose, you're more likely to scratch your nose. But what we realize is that not only are you mimicking the actions of the people you spend time with, but those neurons start to operate at the same frequency as the people that you spend time with. So you start thinking like them as well as acting like them. So be very, very mindful of who you choose to be in your inner circle. Another thing I would say is just constantly learning. Learning does not stop when you graduate from high school or college or whatever. You have the ability to learn your entire life, and you really have to exercise that skill. Because if
Mm-hmm.
not, it does put you at risk for developing dementia later on in life.
Yeah, those are all great things, and it sounds like it's much that the things that are going to give you good physical health are also going to maintain good brain health and cognition. And it's particularly fascinating what you said about our neurons adapting to those that we're around, because I'm aware of research that shows that our moods are contagious, and some of those things can be measured through electrical signals from the heart. But I really hadn't heard the part about the neurons actually adapting to the people around us. So, yeah, I think people ought to be more aware of who they're around, and make sure that they're contributing to their brain health, now that you've mentioned that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why they say things like, if you're around five people that aren't doing good things in the world, you're going to be the sixth person not doing the good things in the world, right? So you've got
Right.
to be mindful of who you spend time with.
Absolutely. Can you explain the relationship between alcohol consumption and its effects on brain health? You hear varying reports of you can drink this amount of wine and it maybe is different for males and females, or this amount of alcohol, but are there really any safe levels of alcohol consumption if you want to maintain optimal brain function?
No, alcohol is a poison to the entire body, including the brain. Right? Sort of the jury is out on that.
Hmm.
Most doctors will tell you there is no benefit to alcohol at all. The reason why they say that a glass of wine may be good for your heart is because that within grapes and other fruits and vegetables, there is a compound called resveratrol, which
Hmm.
is a really powerful anti-inflammatory antioxidant. But it's not specific to alcohol. It's specific to
Hmm.
grapes and other fruits and vegetables. So if you eat fruits and vegetables, you'll be fine. Alcohol itself is toxic. It's associated with more than 200 different diseases, including high blood pressure, diabetes, dementia, seizures, neuropathy, and specifically when it comes to the brain. When you ingest alcohol, it actually causes your brain to shrink. It dehydrates your brain in that moment. And the reason that people get tipsy and they get drunk, it's because the alcohol is causing dysfunction in neurons. Neurons
Hmm.
now can't communicate properly with other neurons. And so not only are you causing the brain to shrink, you're causing dysfunction amongst neurons, and you're inhibiting some of the neurotransmitters in our brains. So you're having an effect on things like GABA, which is why people might get, a little sleepy or kind of a little laid back, but other chemicals are being altered like dopamine and serotonin. And so, if somebody has a little bit of alcohol, right, and they shrink their brain, they're causing all this dysfunction, and the next day they don't drink, yeah, your brain can sort of pump back up. But if you're constantly doing this, if you do this often enough, at some point, your brain is not going to be able to recover. And so I see
Hmm.
people all the time who have alcohol related dementia. I see people all the time who develop seizures, um, who have seizures related to alcohol. So alcohol is poison to the entire body, including the brain.
Yeah, and that's good to know because I think a lot of people just think of the impacts on the liver that alcohol has. That's the primary thing people associate the damage with, but alcohol really can, like you say, be damaging to the entire body, and helping people understand the effects that it has immediately and chronically on the brain is important.
Yeah.
You
And it's
mentioned,
associated with more than
y-
7 different cancers, right?
yeah, yeah.
Cancers.
There's just so many reasons not to
Yeah.
consume, right? Um, you mentioned sleep as one of the important lifestyle factors, and I think that in modern society, it's a common issue to deprive ourselves of sleep because we want to focus on getting other things done, and so people will not get the appropriate amount of sleep. How does lack of sleep affect the brain, and what are some strategies for improving sleep quality to support brain health?
Yeah. So sleep is one of those other things that impacts, again, every aspect of our body. And so usually, when I'm talking to men about their health,
Hmm.
there's two places you've got to hit guys in order to get them to do something healthy. You got to hit them in their wallets. So basically, this is going to prevent you from making money.
Yep.
Or you got to hit them in their pants and be like, look, this is going to impact your libido.
Yep.
And sleep has a significant actually impact on libido, has a significant impact on testosterone. But so it impacts every aspect of our health, including things like high blood pressure, heart disease. But when it comes to the brain, like I said before, sleep is where you start to clear out the toxins that build up throughout the day in your brain. And in fact, when you can't clear out those toxins, what we see is the same kind of plaques start to build up in the brain that we see in people with Alzheimer's disease.
Hmm.
And so there's the link to dementia. Sleep is where we take the things that we have learned throughout the day and actually turn them into memory. And so I'll get a lot of people that come to me and they're like, oh, I'm having trouble with my memory, but they're only sleeping 3 to 4 hours a day, right? So they're not actually taking the thing that they've learned and turning it into memory. So sleep is crucial for the brain. And I tell people all the time, sleep is actually made for your brain.
Hmm.
That is when your brain is doing the really important things to keep it healthy.
Yeah, all great tips, and just more reason for us to not fall into the trap that society said of the 3 to 4 hours a night of sleep and getting the right amount of sleep.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think is really impactful to not just the brain, but overall health is stress. Stress is a prevalent aspect of daily life for many people. What are the neurological implications of chronic stress on the brain, and how can individuals effectively manage stress to protect their brain health?
Yeah. So one of the big consequences of chronic stress on the brain is memory loss.
Mm.
And so we are all built for short-term stress, right? Like early humans, if they were being hunted by like a saber-toothed tiger, I'm assuming saber-toothed tiger and early humans were around at the same time. But
Hmm.
if they were being hunted by saber-toothed tiger, as soon as saber-toothed tiger left, their stress went down, right? But our stress has evolved over time. Now, stress is not about something hunting us, trying to prey on us, or stress is now bills, right?
Hmm.
Stress is family dynamics. Stress is whatever drama is going on at work, you know? So, stress is constantly happening all the time. And as a result, we see that people develop significant memory problems. People develop, their cortisol levels are really high all the time. So it puts them at risk for diabetes. It puts them at risk for obesity. It weakens their immune system. And because it has an impact on memory, they're constantly always focused on the stressor.
Hmm.
And so trauma is stress sort of taken to the nth degree, right? If a lion walks into the room that you're in right now, that is going to be significantly stressful. You're only going to be focused on that lion, where that lion is in the room, the posture of that lion, maybe where the door is for you to run, maybe where something is for you to pick up to try to fight. But essentially, your focus is on that lion. 2 weeks from now, if you survive that lion being in the room, and 2 weeks from now, you're telling the story, and they're like, well, what were you doing at that time? You might be like, you know what? I don't even remember what I was doing in the room, because that wasn't what was most important for your brain in that moment. What was most important was everything that had to do with that line to enhance your survival.
Right.
And that's how chronic stress impacts us. It keeps us focused on the stressors and sort of blocks everything else out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that your survival instincts are definitely going to take over, and your body's going to prioritize life-saving things, systems, because it wants to survive, right? Um,
Yeah.
we mentioned a little bit nutrition as part of one of the important things that we should be doing for our brain. Are
Yep.
there specific dietary habits or even nutritional supplements that are particularly beneficial for brain health?
Yeah. Well, I think we forget why it is that we're supposed to eat, right? The reason that we eat is in order to maintain the energy that we need to go about our day. In today's modern world, we eat because we're bored, we eat because we're sad, we eat because we're happy. We're just constantly eating, and food is very readily available. Especially sugar is very readily available. We don't
Yeah.
have to work at all for food. We can just kind of, take a few steps in our kitchen and pull something out. And so this does have significant negative consequences because it takes work for your body to break down food, especially foods that are highly processed. And as a result of that work, you get toxins that form, cells start to rip apart, they leak out their content into the body. You get widespread inflammation. And so, one of the things that we see, since we were talking about neuroplasticity, is actually when you decrease your calorie intake, neuroplasticity goes up. Brain derived neurotrophic factor, which is the chemical that's associated with neuroplasticity,
Hmm.
actually increases. And so it's healthier for our brains to decrease our calorie intake. The other thing is carbohydrates um, cause our bodies to release insulin because carbohydrates break down into simple sugars. Our body needs to then take up that sugar.
Hmm.
But insulin is the biggest growth factor in the body. And that's why people put on weight, because they're putting out so much insulin, it's causing them to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Insulin is also very pro-inflammatory and causes inflammation in your body, including in your brain. And so you have to find healthy ways in order to eat to sustain your level of activity and not to be constantly eating. One of the things that I tell people all the time is if you're going to have a meal, eat until you're about 60 to 70% full. Don't eat until you're 100% full. Don't go back for seconds and for thirds, right? Because that's not going to be healthy for your brain. What two, you want to be making sure that you're drinking plenty of water. You
Mm-hmm.
want to drink, depending on your body weight, it's going to be something like 2 to 4 liters of water a day. And even if you're 20% dehydrated, you can experience things like brain fog and fatigue. So you want to make sure that you're getting plenty of water in your system. When it comes to things like supplements, there's certainly things that are going to be really healthy for your brain. One of those is omega-3 fatty acids, which you can
Yep.
find eating fish. And the reason is because fatty acids are part of your cell membrane. They're part of the wall that makes up the cell. And so that helps to stabilize the cell membrane even more. Omega-3 fatty acids are also anti-inflammatory. They're antioxidants. You want to things like ginkgo biloba, which help to improve memory,
Mm-hmm.
are powerful anti-inflammatories and are thought to be neuroprotective, so prevent neurons from being damaged. But it's not just the supplements. Getting berries into your system, strawberries, blueberries, those things are really great for your brain. Eating walnuts, that's really great for your brain. So there's a lot that people can do every single day in terms of what they're taking into their bodies that are going to be really healthy for their brains.
Yeah, sounds like I'm doing some of the things right then, because definitely get those omega fatty acids, and berries are one of the things that I prioritize among my fruits because I've
Yeah.
read that research in relation to brain health and cognition. But
Yeah.
how about music? Music has been shown to have various effects on the brain. Can you discuss how music influences brain health and cognition? And are there specific types of music or
Yeah.
genres that people should listen to because they're more beneficial?
Well, I think first and foremost, people have to be very mindful of what they're listening to, right? Because we tend to listen to things because they have a good beat and not necessarily listen to the words.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you pick out the words, you're just like, oh my God, this is horrendous, right?
Yeah.
And that's what your subconscious mind is sort of taking in. Music lights up the brain like nothing else. It has a tremendous, powerful impact on the brain. In fact, I'm working on a project right now called Music for Miracles because music is so impactful. And when we think about it, right, if you put on some music right now, you might unconsciously start to sway to the beat, right? So it's activating your motor systems. You're listening to the music. Potentially you're listening to the words. So it's activating the parts of the brain that are responsible for taking in information. You might know the words and start singing to it. So it activates different parts of your brain that have to do with language. And so it really lights up a lot of the different areas of the brain. And music is so powerful that companies use music to their advantage. So you walk into a store, there's music playing, right? And it's usually something that's really soothing, something that
Mm-hmm.
is not going to be dangerous to our nervous system, right? Because they want us to stay in that store longer so that way we shop more.
Yep.
Music also causes the release of dopamine, which plays a role in our motivation and reward systems. So if we're in a store that's playing really good music, right, that keeps us in that store and then we're shopping more, then it activates dopamine, which makes us want to do it again. So music influences everything from our physical health, our mental, emotional health, even our financial health.
Yeah, that's great information to have, and to we just need to be more mindful about what we're doing on a daily basis. We talked about the people we're around, the foods that we're eating, the exercise we're participating in, and even the music we listen to can impact us. Are there any cognitive activities or mental exercises that individuals can engage in to enhance brain resilience and cognitive function as they age?
Yeah, so I would say that being creatures of habit kills our neurological potential.
Okay.
And you want to uh, do new things, right? Even if it's something like you're taking a new way home on your commute. You want to learn a new language. interact with new people who have different thoughts than you do. It doesn't mean that you have to adopt their way of thinking, but just hearing their perspective allows your brain to make new neurons and new connections. Learn a new skill, pick up a new sport, learn a new instrument. Those are the things that are going to be really powerful for your brain health. So you don't have to necessarily go and download these games and try to do these games. You just have to make sure that you are engaging in new activities and learning new things on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that, because I remember that I was told years ago, try brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand, and that can help your brain. And so doing these things that just challenge our brain in a different way, or that our brain is not used to, sounds like can be highly impactful as we age.
Absolutely. And our brains like to be able to predict the future. And the way that our brains predict the future is by keeping us doing the same things over and over and over again. And so we have to take charge of our brains and say, look, I'm safe. I'm good. Now I've got to do things that are not just about my survival. It's about making sure that I thrive in terms of my brain health and in terms of the life that I want to create for myself.
Right. Well, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your evening to help share with the listeners how to keep their cognitive function and brain health as resilient as possible, because I think that as dementia and other cognitive dysfunctions or disorders become more prevalent, it does tend to make people be more concerned about their brain health and want to put more emphasis and focus into that. And it sounds like, from what you're sharing with us, there are some simple things that can have dramatic impacts on people's brain health and their cognitive resilience. And so I'm grateful that you've shared those things with us and given us some things that I think people can implement immediately in their daily routines and start to notice differences.
Yeah, I mean, look, these are things that people can easily do. You don't have to go someplace and do it. You can exercise at home. You can make healthier food choices. You can go on the computer and learn something new today. You can decide to interact with different people. All of that is going to be really powerful for your brain.
Right. Well, thank you again for being on. I think you've shared so many positive and good things that people can do that are just simple to implement. Maybe I'll have you on another time and we'll talk about brain health some more and get maybe into another part of the subject.
That would be great. Looking forward to that.
Thanks. Thank you for investing your precious time with us today. I trust you've uncovered valuable insights to elevate your health and enhance your quality of life. If you're hungry for more evidence-based wisdom to transform your well-being, I invite you to check out my 20-plus books, all waiting to be explored on my website, authorscott.com. Don't miss out on the chance to supercharge your knowledge. Please share, like, and subscribe to be part of the movement revolutionizing lives. In a world drowning in noise and endless information, your share can be the beacon that guides others to a better life. Together, let's make a difference by amplifying the life-changing knowledge you've gained today. Until next time, here's to your journey to boundless health and unbridled happiness.